Hi, everyone, and welcome to the What's Halvening podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Cassie Clifton, and once again, in case you missed the first episode of What's Halvening, this is going to be a weekly podcast bringing you crypto mining and mining-related content, although it's going to be about 80% related to Bitcoin mining. So this is another episode from Chengdu, China, at MinerUpdate's event. If you were here last week, you might remember that the interview in the bridal suite in Chengdu had a couple of interruptions, so we decided to take advantage of the super cozy slippers that the Marriott always provides and just record in the hotel room. Today, I'm joined by two researchers, Apolline Blandin of the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance, or CCAF, and John Quigley, who's the head of research at MinerUpdate, which is the organization that's hosting this conference, and he's also the founder of Adaptive Analysis. I'm really excited about today's episode, and I think you're going to find it really interesting. Apolline shares the motivation behind the Cambridge Bitcoin Energy Consumption Index, or CBECI, which is a real-time estimate, meaning that it updates about every 30 seconds, of the total electricity load and consumption of the Bitcoin network. She also elaborates on the model's assumptions, findings, limitations, and the next step in CCAF's research, calculating the carbon footprint of the network in order to assess Bitcoin's impact on global warming. Or as I'd like to think, disproving any sort of significant impact, but I suppose that's to be determined. And of course, we wanted to share some of the highlights of the panels and recurring themes of the conversations here in Chengdu, like the panel of pool operators sharing their concerns around the centralization of mining and their willingness to be more transparent, the intricacies of the hardware market, discussions around derivative markets being developed for the mining space, the trend of and shift towards construction of mobile containers for mining operations, and the regulatory impact of some of the misconceptions around Bitcoin's energy. Being at an intimate event such as MinerSummit, there have been so many interesting and unique perspectives shared, which is probably pretty apparent in the number of topics that Apolline, John, and I are able to cover in such a short amount of time. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. These two are a lot of fun to record with. Hi, everyone. So I'm super excited to be here in Chengdu, China, actually, for the Global Mining Leaders Summit. I'm here with John Quigley and Apolline Blandin, both researchers. John is with MinerUpdate, and Apolline is with the Cambridge Center for
Alternative Finance.
I'm sorry?
Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance.
Okay, yes.
CCAF.
CCAF, in short, right. There's lots of acronyms, I feel like, with your work, which can get a little bit confusing. Have you guys ever been to Chengdu before?
First time.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's been good.
Cool. How long are you going to be here for?
Well, I'm staying in Chengdu till the 21st, but I'm really intrigued with China, so I'm going to stay till the end of November. I'm going to do like a little circle, go to Xi'an, Beijing.
I didn't realize that. Did you extend your flight?
No, I got a 90-day entry visa. Actually, I do have a flight going out of Chengdu at the 27th, but I'm just like, going to miss that one.
Yeah, not going to take it.
Experience for China, yeah. When in China, right?
Yeah, no, I understand that. What about you, Apolline?
So I used to live in Beijing for my
Mm-hmm.
studies, but I've never been to Chengdu. So I traveled a bit around China and wanted to come to Sichuan, but never had the opportunity before.
Cool.
We're going to see pandas tomorrow morning.
Yep.
I'm so jealous.
You're not coming?
No, I can't. So I don't know about you guys, but I had a bit of difficulty at the airport. So I don't actually have a visa, so I assume both of you do. So I'm on the transit visa. So I was detained in customs for about an hour and a half before they let me through. So yeah, that was unfortunate.
You didn't apply for the F visa or the business or conference?
No, I just decided that since it was like it was a super short trip, that I would just go without. But I booked my flights 2 days before I left for Frankfurt because I was at Bitmain's conference before this. So yeah, it was just a quick turn of events and didn't think to apply for it because I didn't realize we'd be 2.5 hours outside the city for the mining tour. But how have you guys' time been here at the summit?
Really good.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think what I was saying is it's been one of the best conferences I've attended this
year. Really?
I think
How many have you been to this year?
Well, quite a few, but I think it's also because you have very high profiles people. The content is really interesting.
It is super interesting,
and people are very honest with everything. It's not so much marketing.
Right.
I feel sometimes a lot of crypto asset related events are quite of a big circus with thousands of attendees, whereas here the audience is pretty decent.
Yeah, I feel like it's a much smaller event as well, so it's a lot more intimate and you're kind of running into the same people, and so it's been really nice getting to know people that I previously had never met or run into at all. So
And also because, I mean, just on this, because a lot of people never been to China before, never been to Chengdu, and then we're all staying like for 3-4 days. It's pretty cool to actually take time to get to know each other. And,
So shout out to Miner Update for organizing everything. This is a really great event.
Yeah. Thanks, ladies, for coming. Yeah, it's been good so far. It's like what we tried to achieve was have exactly what you ladies have just shared, like an intimate experience. We're not charging for tickets. It was just 300 invited attendees. We wanted to be really high quality. Some days in the hash rate capital of the world, this is where like a lot of the mining takes place. So yeah, we wanted to bring in people from Western miners, bring them and see the differences between Eastern mining and Western mining, and we've got a lot of good feedback so far. People seem to have really enjoyed it. I think it's a really high quality conference. So hopefully we'll do more in 2020.
Did you extend invitations to people, or like it went both ways, sort of?
Yeah, initially extending invitations and getting the word out about the conference. Then people could apply on Eventbrite for tickets, and then we just vetted them, see if they're mining, seeing if it made sense for them to come to the conference, and did it that way.
Very cool. Well, John, since you're already speaking, do you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself and on Miner Update and what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. Actually, the Miner Update team is still very early, and it's a very lean and mean team. It's still just 3 of us. It's myself, Daniel and Mia. Daniel and Mia are the co-founders. We launched in April this year. Daniel and Mia seen my writing work, my portfolio online, and hired a team of writers, but the 3 of us just clicked really well, so we just kept working together as a 3, and the other writers didn't continue working.
So where are you guys based? And content focus, yeah.
Where are we based?
Yeah.
Like physically? Well, we don't really have a base. Well, me personally, I don't have a base. Daniel and Mia are mostly in Bangkok. I have been in Bali mostly this year, which is obviously amazing.
A beautiful place to be this year.
Yeah, that's the remote worker capital of the world.
Yeah, so you guys are a little bit distributed and can kind of move around, jump around. That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Before Miner Update, I was mostly doing research in the markets and stuff. I had my research firm Adaptive Analysis, which is still going, but everything clicked so well with Miner Update that 90% of my work now is just focused on building out the research and content for them.
Yeah, so what is the goal of Miner Update, would you say?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think one of the reasons I clicked so well with the team was that we don't go with the normal model of a media site where we try to do everything to get eyeballs on the content and then monetize these eyeballs through advertisements. The focus from the start, and I got this immediately from Mia and Daniel, was on producing very high quality content and building up a reputation and trust in the industry, and then at a later point like monetizing this or leveraging this through building connections, brokering other deals. So this event is actually our first thing which is in any way to do with money, because we took on sponsors, so this is the first time. Yeah, super exciting, and congratulations on a really, really successful event. It's been so much fun. I've met tons of amazing people doing some really, really cool stuff in the space. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been very enjoyable. And Apolline, what about you? I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background. I feel like you seem to be kind of a jack of all trades.
Not sure I can say that, but so I've joined the center back in April 2018.
Okay. And what led you there?
So I was studying in Beijing, kind of came across cryptocurrencies, but didn't pay much attention because my research was more focused on mobile finance in China. And then I went back to Europe, worked a little bit for this trade association of startups and investors in France. And there were a lot of new startups working on cryptocurrencies, and especially Ledger and another one, CoinHouse. So then we were kind of working a lot on the regulation at the EU level. But the thing is, I had to cover other topics than cryptocurrency and blockchain. So I really wanted to go back to research and do something specifically on cryptocurrency, and then I came across the position at the University of Cambridge and applied. And so I joined the team initially led by Michelle. And so what we do is essentially monitoring the ecosystem since 2017. So we cover the public blockchain cryptocurrency ecosystem, but we also have research on the enterprise blockchain side. So we do these annual benchmarking studies.
So like a broad array of knowledge about the space.
Yeah, and I have to say it's quite hard to remain generalist, because I learn a lot on so many areas like energy, technical stuff, sociology, political. It's very political as well.
Right.
So it's
Absolutely.
really
Is there an area that of interest, like particular interest to you, that you've really enjoyed learning about? That you would like to kind of double down on, or? I
enjoy quite a lot. So I enjoy all the research about the mining industry. I really find it fascinating, and also because
we like to hear that. Yeah. Also, it's a very nebulous industry, so I think that if we can get some researchers involved, I think that's definitely a great thing for the space.
And also because it has a connection with China, so I think that's kind of a personal
naturally,
bias.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And the other one I like, which a lot of people would disagree on, is regulation. Because I think a lot of legal and regulatory concepts are completely challenged by the emergence of cryptocurrencies, and so it's kind of interesting to see how the different states and regulatory authorities respond to that.
I definitely want to come back to the regulation side, but I think most recently some of the work that you have published was in early July, correct? Early July, the Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. Yeah. The CBECI, so another acronym for us there.
Indeed.
Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about that, sort of like what led you guys to do the study in the first place, but also, what your findings were, and just what the motivation was behind that.
So I think the main motivation really was the fact that there was no reliable... there were a lot of, news headlines kind of saying Bitcoin is contributing to global warming and it's going to burn the planet, etc. We all saw that during the presentation yesterday by Chris as well. And so very often they were quoting a single source, which we thought was interesting, but we had a different methodology. And so we just wanted to provide an alternative and also bring some nuance in the debate, because we interact a lot with regulators, governments, the general public, and there's a lot of education to be done there, and especially on this specific topic, because very often when you start talking about cryptocurrency, the first thing is but it's using a lot of energy and that's not good for the planet, etc. Not
necessarily the case either, which is very interesting.
Go for it. It was also actually before the CBECI, the index you launched, there was another one, Digiconomist. But it was very flawed in the methodology it was designed, because I believe it's been a while since I looked at it, but they estimated miner revenue based on the hardware on the market or something like that, but there was a lot of flaws in the methodology. So it was
a lot of assumptions you have to make there too. That
absolutely.
Either way, sure, right?
So in any economic models, you have to make a lot of assumptions. But we thought some of his assumptions were less accurate or less representative of the reality. So what he does is he has more of a top-down approach where he identified the revenues of miners, then assume that 60% of it goes into electricity costs, and then assume that miners pays on average 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and then derive the consumption based on this. Whereas we rather look at all the equipment available to the markets and then work our way up to then calculate the electricity consumption. But we have a similar assumption, for instance, on the fact that miners will pay 5 cents per kilowatt hour as well.
And you also have upper bound and lower bound, and plus you can fluctuate the electricity rate.
That's the thing, is you can't have an exact figure for how much Bitcoin consumes.
Right, absolutely.
So you need to provide an estimate, and so what we decided is to have a upper bound, so two boundaries, upper bound and lower bound. And actually I should say that this is based on a methodology developed by Mark Bevans a long time ago, but it was just a paper he published, and he actually reviewed our index and collaborated with us. So really the underlying assumption for the model is to say that miners only run equipment that outweighs their electricity cost, which I think is a reasonable assumption.
Yes, I would say so.
And then we calculate the profitability threshold. Then we calculate the lower bound, which is based on the assumption that all miners run the most energy efficient equipment and that they have a very energy efficient data center as well.
For the upper bound, correct?
For
the lower bound, sorry,
yeah.
yes, lower bound.
So very efficient data center means a PUE of 1.01, something like this. And then the upper bound is based on the assumption that all miners run the least energy efficient equipment, but still profitable on the market. And that they have a PUE of about 1.2. And then within this boundary, we then calculate our own, what we call best guess estimate, which based on the assumption that all miners use all energy efficient and profitable hardware available to the market.
So is this a study just on the hardware and not so much on the overall mining operation itself? So like not including the cooling load?
So that's some of the limitation of the model, that we only focus on operational costs going into electricity. We don't look at capex or like any other maintenance costs.
I feel like it's one step at a time here, though. I mean, even having this sort of research is huge for the space in terms of awareness and kind of debunking some of these misconceptions.
And we also felt that at the moment it's not having a huge effect on the model. So that's definitely something we want to include.
What would you say, like, if you were describing the findings of the study, like what was interesting to you? What was notable? What, like, do you think kind of undermine some of these misconceptions that exist today around Bitcoin using tons and tons of energy?
So actually, the thing is, that's just calculating the electricity consumption. So
Right.
It doesn't tell you much about the sustainability question. So that's really just the first step. The second step will then be to have an more accurate picture of the geographic distribution of hashing facilities, and then based on that, calculate the carbon footprint. And then I think from there, once we have an estimate of the carbon footprint, it would be easier to then make a real assessment of how much Bitcoin is contributing to global warming.
It's just like a data point to inform the argument, right? So people just aren't throwing out ludicrous statements. Yeah, you need to be informed with this argument.
Exactly. Yeah. Fully agree.
So what have been like some of the challenges in like gathering this data?
So for this one, actually it was quite easy because we, a lot of these are like publicly available, or like some of the parameters are like dynamic, so we scrape them from blockchain.info, for instance. And I think the challenge will come in the next step, which is to have this map of hashing facilities. And so, for instance, in December 2018, when we released the second global crypto asset benchmarking study, we had a static version of this mining map. And this map would show essentially at the aggregate level where are the different hashing facility base, etc. So per country. So we based this on a data set of 128 mining farms that we've identified through public sources. But the problem is that's also very biased in the sense that those who advertise on Twitter or like through press release are those who are willing to share the information about their mining operations. It was much harder to get to understand what was happening, for instance, in China, and so that's why we now want to collaborate more with pool operators to then get access to data at the aggregate level again. Of the distribution of the different hash rate. So
Bitmain recently launched their World Digital Mining Map, which I imagine, and I really hope that it'll be of some use to you, but I believe that Chris Benedictson at CoinShares has also begun some of this research, has he not?
Yeah, so it's funny because we had a chat with Chris a few months back talking about this, and the thing is he did the same thing as us, so he had someone working full-time identifying through public sources the different mining facilities he could come across. So it would be interesting to like compare the different data sets. And so Bitmain, so we saw that, and one of my colleagues actually was at the event in Frankfurt, and he sent me a picture of the first kind of MVP of the mining.
Yeah, I took a photo of it as well.
So that's pretty cool. Hopefully, if there is more and more data on this, then it would be easier to get an accurate picture.
Yeah, I think for a lot of miners in this space, I was talking to the Fidelity team this morning, and they were like, oh, well, people don't want to share that information. And I was like, well, what is it that is so, like, what do they find, like, risky for themselves in sharing? I don't necessarily know that, like, sure, maybe divulging some, like, of their, quote, trade secrets and, like, maybe the way that they've designed their facilities, and they have, like, the upper hand in terms of, like, operational efficiency, and maybe, like, they don't want to be the ones that are in, like, the bottom tier and being pushed out when the hash rate goes up. But at the same time, I don't think that, location, because at least most people in the U.S., most facilities in the U.S., they have to be, like, they've been identified by the government, right? There's regulation around that, and even in Canada and North America and in China. So
I think it's always going to be a difficult question to gauge, no matter what happens. Because, right, Bitmain launched their world map, but who's going to share this information? Oftentimes it will be those with the incentive to share. So it might be those that are thinking of providing some hosting services or something like this. Fair enough, miners in North America might all share their data, and we might have a very good picture of what's going on with mining in North America. But in a lot of regions, it might always be an opaque picture, because the reality of the world is sometimes regions are politically uncertain, and people are motivated to keep a low profile with their operations. And people are in control of their own operations. They turn it off, they turn it on, based on the factors of profitability or what's going on in the environment.
Seasonality and power source, yeah.
Yeah, so we might do up a map or a model of the state of mining. It might be very accurate, and it could be completely different the next day, So, but
that's
the work
true.
is good, and we can just do our best to come up with a model of what's going on.
I agree.
Yeah, it's very transient
And
model.
I think it's very context specific. Like, some will have the incentive to share, as you said, because they want to get some visibility and because they are completely regulated, etc. Those in jurisdiction where the regulation is a bit unclear, it might be harder. And also those, for instance, who get their energy from different sources, they don't necessarily want to again share the
disclose
location.
that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, maybe in China people would be a bit more reluctant. But then I talked to a few miners here during the event, and some say, "Oh, I have no issue, telling me about my location."
Also, the opposite side, though, some miners are wanting to keep a low profile.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really on a case by case.
I also wonder too, though, are the miners that want to keep a low profile the ones that are attending conferences? Because I don't necessarily think so. I think that occasionally they will, but I think for the most part, people that are willing to like speak more freely about their operations are the ones that I've met at conferences that have told me like exactly what cities, like what type of power they have, like exactly how they're getting it, their relationship with the government. Like they're just very transparent about all of it.
Yeah.
So
that's why you have. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, it probably also depends on the relationship they have with the government, because the scene of mining in China is very much based on the relationships they have with the local governments. So the ones which are maybe not so solid, they're maybe more incentivized to keep a low profile.
Right. I would say that in addition to the relationships with the hardware manufacturers as well, because like if they're buying on the resale market, maybe they're not as incentivized to come to an event where they know that these manufacturers are going to be, whether like as if like instead if they were going to an event and they were buying directly from manufacturers, they might be more incentivized to like continue developing that relationship with them in hopes of getting better pricing.
And I just want to add, like, for instance, for this research, for the carbon footprint, we actually don't need to know exactly the location of the mining farm. So that's what we've been telling to the different pool operators. We just want the aggregates information. And something we discussed with Chris as well is also, it might be sometimes sensitive data, as we were saying. You don't want to own this data. So, just aggregate level is fine.
So, I'm curious to know, since you don't need to know the exact location, how do you take into effect like some of the different like deltas in temperature in various regions where there are mining operations?
So for this carbon footprint estimate, what we will do is apply the methodology developed by 3 scholars at the Technical University of Munich. And so what they have is, so actually there is a carbon factors per region. And so if you have kind of the distribution across the different provinces in China and across the different world region, then you can apply the carbon factor to this. It's a really interesting paper, and so the only limitation, and that's why we've been talking to pool operators, is that they exclusively rely on data provided by BTC.com and Slushpool on their website, which is based on the location of the different server, and it just gives you information about Europe, USA, and China. So if you're
limited in breadth,
exactly.
Sure. So, is there anything in particular that you feel like coming to this event and speaking to others and like learning from miners in this space that has been helpful in your research? Anything that you'll take back with you?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the different panels yesterday, especially the one with the different pool operators.
That was very interesting.
Very interesting, and how they are, I mean, as we were talking a little bit earlier about the whole centralization of mining and how they're willing to be more transparent on this, be more transparent as well on the type of data they get, etc., and on the operation overall. Really enjoy as well the discussion, the panel led by Chris Bendingson with the different mining farm operators. That was quite interesting as well, and they were very transparent and willing to share about their different strategy, which I didn't really necessarily expected.
Really?
So, yeah.
I feel like you've been pretty transparent as well about your strategy in developing your model.
Yeah, well,
at least it seems so. Yeah, that as
we
well.
have to be very transparent, but I don't know, from like such a competitive industry, you don't necessarily expect everyone to be so transparent.
I think research too may be a little bit different. Like everyone is kind of working towards the same goal, like trying to solve the same problems, and so in a sense, like if you're doing something with your model that maybe another model could like take notes from or adapt or alter some input of their model to make it more accurate, then why not, like in helping one another out? I
mean, the research we do is not for commercial purpose, right? So the only thing we want is to improve and be as accurate as we can. So that's why we want to disclose all the assumptions, and so then we can get feedback, and that's why we have like a feedback form also on the website, so for people to make suggestions.
Yeah, I think a lot of the value you get at conferences like this is actually like the private conversations you have with like different miners out in the hallway and stuff like that. Seeing the different ideas, the different models everyone's using. In terms of actually what took place on stage and stuff like that, one of the areas I'm been quite interested in and hearing people's thoughts on it is the relationship between rigs and the market. We've seen Matt De Souza from Blockware Solutions on our panel Apolline talking about when secondary hardware market prices go up for the latest generation hardware, we also see prices going up. Another area was seeing how different mining farms hedge their risk. So all miners are inherently long difficulty, and with most mining operations it's kind of like they're profitable or they're not profitable. But what we're seeing some of the larger scale farms do is we're seeing them hedge some risks, so in times where miner margins are being squeezed, they're actually not being hurt so much. So how are they doing this? One way is people are selling their rigs. At other times are like creating hosting contracts where some of their hash power is lent out, so they're like bringing in cash flow and stuff like that. And one big topic which has came up quite a bit in the conference is people talking about derivative markets being developed around mining. So derivative markets like for difficulty-based derivatives, hash rate-based derivatives. I know I touched on a lot of topics there, and each of them probably you could discuss for 30 minutes or whatever. But yeah, I feel like all of them were quite interesting topics which came up individually during the conference.
Yeah, one of the ones that I think is like really fascinating, which I think it's different. Like you can make the correlation in your head, but like once you're listening to someone else like say it on stage, you're able to like think a little bit more critically through it. But like the realization that like the cost of mining hardware really does follow the price of Bitcoin. And like you think about any other type of like hardware that's on any hardware product that's on the market that's not within the Bitcoin like mining space, and that doesn't happen. Like those products, they depreciate, and they don't ever, like, after depreciating, they don't increase in value because of inflation, right? Like, they're not tethered in that sense. So I don't necessarily know what the implications of that are, but I just think it's kind of interesting to think and, like, peel that layer back about, you know, just the fact that, like, this is a very unique market, and that's a phenomenon that is, you know, very unique to Bitcoin mining, or I guess crypto mining.
And I wonder, how many people actually give some thought to this? No, not yet. Yeah.
I'm definitely not the expert on that, but I would be curious to learn a little bit more.
I think as well, actually, the fact that Bitcoin is mined by ASIC hardware, like, it's actually a controversial topic, because in a lot of altcoins, people are thinking, oh, we need to have a majority GPU mine, blah, blah, blah. But actually, I think it's one of the really strong features of the Bitcoin network is that it has an ASIC monopoly, right? So it kind of aligns the long-term incentives of miners with the network, because miners' balance sheet is tied to their hardware plus the value of Bitcoin itself, right? If they do something against the best interest of the Bitcoin network, then they can't use their and something happens to the Bitcoin network, they can't use this hardware for anything else. It becomes completely worthless. Whereas, let's say in a network which was mined by majority GPU, if a short-term profit opportunity arose, they could capitalize on this, and even if it has a negative impact on the network which they were primarily mining on, it doesn't matter, because their GPU can be used for something else.
Right, but it compromises the security of the Bitcoin network at large too. If enough people are switching to a different algorithm to mine a different coin.
That's why I'm saying it's important that they have the monopoly, because Bitcoin at the moment, right, has Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Cash SV can also be mined with the same hardware because it's the same mining algorithm. But if you combine the hash rate of the three networks, Bitcoin has 97% of the hash rate, right? So this hash power could easily be redirected to these other networks to launch an attack, you know?
It's a scary thought.
It reminds me of I think it was the blog post written by Nick Carter, no? When he discussed this.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure what specific blog post it was.
When he was discussing settlement finality.
Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly where I got it from, yeah.
Yeah, very good point.
I have not read that, but...
highly recommend it.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. Whose blog post did you say that was?
Nick Carter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's so many interesting things I feel like that I've.
We were talking about this yesterday. It's like, how do you?
Yeah, we should probably talk about like another controversial topic is this idea of Bitcoin consuming too much energy, right? People are very tore apart on this topic.
Bitcoin is boiling the oceans.
Exactly, right? But Bitcoin is going to consume as much energy as miners are willing to expend, right? If it doesn't make sense for miners to expend energy, and if there's not enough users on the network to compensate miners, or the network's not getting any usage, then it's not going to generate any energy, or not going to expend any energy. I feel like there's a lot of other stuff which is consuming a lot of energy, and having a decentralized payment network such as Bitcoin is a very, very good use of energy.
Yeah, and actually on this point, so we have on the CBECI we also have a comparison page, which
I was about to dive into that. Ask questions.
The purpose is not to provide a direct comparison with Bitcoin,
but to contextualize.
Exactly. Yeah. Contextualize the figures. And on this, on your previous point, actually, a lot of existing system we don't have reliable study on this, so we don't know how much energy is being consumed by the traditional banking system and stuff like that.
Well, even things like, and maybe there is info on this, but I haven't, dug super deep into this, but like AWS and Google and Netflix streaming services and like Xboxes and I know Idle Appliances, and all this is on the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance on the website. So super, super interesting data points. Is there anything that any particular facts or contextualized pieces of information on what other like other products that are consuming energy or other energy consumption like metrics that you've pointed out that are like very notable and kind of help contextualize this thought?
Yeah, so on the comparison page we have, world comparison, country comparison, and then we have something that is, a bit more controversial maybe, is like, potential like wasteful source of energy. And so we have one about home idle appliance in the US. I can't remember exactly how many times it can power the Bitcoin network, but it's probably...
Well, anybody can look on the website,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
There's more than one. I know that.
And so that one is quite interesting, because I think there is no debate over the fact that this is a wasteful source of electricity consumption.
Amanda mentioned yesterday as well, like how much energy gaming consumes. Christmas lights is another big one for December.
But the thing is, like, a lot of people might argue, gaming is not wasteful.
No, absolutely, but it's just to contextualize.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, you can use...
So the amount of electricity consumed every year by always-on but inactive home devices in the USA alone could power the Bitcoin network for 2.9 years. So turn your lights off when you leave the room. Maybe unplug your TV or get some smart switches.
And on the other side, we also provide a figure for the University of Cambridge. Mm-hmm. So I think it's on the opposite.
434 years, yeah. So the opposite, inverse. So the amount of electricity used annually by the Bitcoin network could satisfy the energy needs of the University of Cambridge for 434 years.
So, yeah.
How many people are at Cambridge University?
Really good question. So I know the population of Cambridge is 120,000 people, and I think I can't remember which percentage of the population was people connected to the university, but yeah, quite a significant part.
Is it pretty sizable? Yeah, that's really interesting because that's a significant number. But also you think about like universities and the amount of energy that they consume, and like in terms of like.
Yeah, and here it's also like just electricity, so like you can use heating just by using gas and not connected to...
Right. So I bet a lot of it is gas. Is it gas heated, do you know?
I can't remember.
No, I would kind of assume so, honestly, at this rate.
I think so,
yeah, I'd be very surprised if not, especially with like how cold it gets. But interesting.
Yeah, I want to add something as well to that point. One point which was made in the Bitcoin standard, which I need to look further into myself, but it's a very interesting point, is the idea that how much energy is consumed by an unsound monetary system, right? So the idea of the forex market and trade organizations and stuff like that, and all the energy and labor and everything which has to go into that, based on the fiat currency system we have today, it would actually be a worthwhile use of energy to put it into something like Bitcoin, which could potentially be a sound monetary system and just coordinate economic activity in an effective way. But yeah, one thing which was brought up in the book, and you probably know the proper pronunciation of this, was La Belle Epoque.
La Belle Epoque, yeah.
Yeah, like the beautiful period. So it was a period which flourished under the gold standard, where capital flowed freely between countries, and industrial activity flourished, and a lot of innovations were made. The foundations of the internet, the foundations of electricity were all made in this time, and it all came under the gold standard, right? But since then we've seen we've switched to a model of fiat currency, with fiat meaning by decree, where governments can easily inflate the money supply, right? And we're kind of deviating from the role of money in coordinating economic activity to a role of money where governments can easily inflate the supply to serve their own needs. So this is something, it's obviously another controversial topic I would need to look into further myself, but just the energy consumed by an inefficient monetary system alone could be huge. And the forex market is a perfect illustration of it. Like, the forex market is orders of magnitude greater than actual GDP of all countries combined.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting thought. It's so hard to like put data points behind that though, and like, you know, draw some sort of conclusion. Just because it's,
absolutely.
Yeah, it would be a lot of digging. Probably like a lifetime project, and maybe then some after that.
Yeah.
But definitely an interesting thought. I had another question. So, you talked a little bit about your research in regulation. I'm curious to know, does any of that research kind of overlap with the mining space in terms of like getting a better understanding of which countries are maybe like mining friendly, and how they've been what other regulations around cryptocurrency affect the mining landscape in various countries?
So we released this regulatory study back in April this year. And so it's a comparative analysis of 23 jurisdictions that we selected based on the level of crypto asset activities and also the level of regulatory activity. And so the idea was to identify what has been their regulatory response and also what type of regulation did they apply to the different activities around crypto assets. So we looked at issuance, distribution, exchange, storage, and payment. And so in the issuance, part of it covered mining, and actually very few among our survey sample, very few of the jurisdictions have even mentioned like miners and mining.
I wondered that.
Yeah, I think it's only 7% of them, maybe even less, 5%. Actually mention mining, either to say it's excluded from applicable regulation, or either develop like a kind of a bespoke response. So, for instance, in Russia, they were discussing a digital asset bill. I think it still hasn't been passed, but in the bill there was the possibility to create a license just for miners. But no, very very few jurisdictions have actually considered.
You said that you work with regulators to better understand the space as well. Have you seen any instances where like the lack of knowledge and education, or like maybe even available information on mining infrastructure and miners, and like maybe what the like implications are for the country, but also like what it might mean for like bringing jobs to the city, and like energy consumption, just general lack of knowledge in that area, how that has influenced decisions? So
I personally didn't come across any regulator, any specific regulators. Mm-hmm. I've heard of other people who said that their local government had a complete misunderstanding of what mining was doing, and so they set up a blockchain association or cryptocurrency mining association, then educated the different regulators, brought them to different area in Sweden, etc., to kind of show them what is the potential behind it. But we, again, personally, like in this study, not really. We're actually developing an online course for regulators on fintech regulations. So it includes cryptocurrency and DLT at large, but also anything like any other fintech related topics. So
it's very exciting to hear. Yeah, there are definitely some areas in the space where clarity on regulation can mean leaps and bounds in terms of like development potential and adoption. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about you? And you're in the, with the multitude of miners that you have been interacting with over the last couple of days, and just throughout your time researching, any sort of interesting insights on regulation?
Regulation wouldn't really be my strong point, to be honest. It's so like, because every jurisdiction has a different one, and it's constantly changing, and it's in different languages. So it will be like a full-time job trying to keep on top of that. But it seems like the developments this year, Iran have pushed through some legislation which have made it more clear for miners. Canada, I'm not so sure what the situation is over there, but people have said they have set up their operations there because it's quite politically friendly. But I've also heard the other argument that they're proposing some changes, so Blockstream set up in North America instead of Canada, even though they were initially going to set up in Canada.
I actually talked to a miner at Bitmain's event in Frankfurt, and he has an operation in, I believe it was Quebec, Canada, and he was saying that, so like in the entirety of Canada, they have a set, it's not a deregulated market, so they have a set electricity price of 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's a fairly cheap price, right? And then maybe you're tapping into like hydro, or you're building substations and you're lowering that even a little bit more. But what he said was, for his operation in particular, and I haven't heard this from other miners, so I don't know if this was unique to him, but the government had come back and requested that he pay like a 7.5% like energy tax on whatever he was paying in. So it's interesting, but I think it's still unclear, and no like solid firm decisions have been made in that area.
Yeah, I think that was also the example of Norway mentioned by Chris yesterday during the panel, where the parliament decided that mining operations should not be, so what they have for like intensive industry consuming a lot of energy, like they are excluded from taxation framework, but they actually included miners. So they have pretty
right. So every infrastructure like project being, or like high manufacturing infrastructure, any project or any operation that's consuming lots of energy, they have that exemption from exactly, except for Bitcoin miners who have to pay the tax. So it's rather unfortunate. I'm not sure exactly what the miscommunication or like knowledge that was lacking there in that specific area, but that led to that regulatory decision. So I guess on the subject of regulation and lack of clarity, I feel like the more miners that I talk to, I've been noticing this phenomenon of miners choosing to build facilities in containers so that they're mobile, and I assume like predominantly to hedge against geopolitical risk. But it's interesting. I find like very few operations that are still developing are operations that are not building containers. There's still a lot out there, but the ones that are coming to the space, I think it's a very easy way to enter the space, and a lot of them are also like co-location or offering hosting services that are building these containers. So I found that quite interesting over the last couple of days.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. And I was chatting to the slush pool folks earlier. I was saying, I was asking them, do they feel like ever a region will be hold the dominant share of hash rate? China holds it today because it has a lot of advantages to mining here. But they feel that it will never be the case that like 90% plus hash rate will be in one area, because there's always some risk to being in a certain area, right? Because you can never be certain of what's going to happen with this area going forward in terms of regulation and politics.
Right. Some riskier than others, but yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of like having your portfolio, right? Yeah. You don't want to have it all into one stock. You want to hedge some risk.
Exactly. Yeah, diversify a little bit. And I think like what I've seen, some mining companies doing as well is that sure they're in multiple countries, but I spoke with Ayal yesterday at Minevest, and he actually has like operations in like 5 different countries or something like that, like Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, China, but like some other Central Asian countries, which I found quite interesting. And his approach was like, they're not super familiar with this concept of mining, but I think that like he has like a strong like business and like product development background. So he's, founded several companies and sold products, and then has now found his way into the mining space. But he goes in and they see his background, and it's kind of like the, step 1 of credibility. And then step 2 is like him becoming friends with these, like regulatory entities and officials, and has been able to like convince them that he's bringing jobs into the country. So like in going to rural areas where they didn't really have other options for work, that were, just more like farmland style. So I think that that's really interesting, and like as kind of the first mover there, he's got a leg up and he's influencing their decisions, and it's very new to them, and he can be like a positive influence on regulators in other countries, which is very neat.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens with Minevest.
I am too.
Over the next 1 to 2 years. AL seems focused to make this a success.
They are putting, so they're expanding by 20 megawatts every month. Every single month. So like pouring like $10 million into, like building their containers and acquiring hardware to continue building out these. Yeah, that's insane to me.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of capital to be pouring in. But yeah, definitely excited. They were interesting to meet. Any like, I guess, sort of parting thoughts that you guys want to share?
Yeah, there were just these miners from, I think they were now from Ukraine yesterday, who asked me whether I felt like some of the miners were, even more long-term minded, like in the sense that some are trying to think
Bitcoin in 5 years versus Bitcoin in 2, or
no, like for instance, really kind of creating a circular system with their mining farm. So like for instance, using the heat produced by the mining farm to, I don't know, power like the heating in different houses or like local community, or using it for like greenhouses and stuff like that. I don't know if you have any view on this. I mean, I know only probably 2 mining farm who are like they're really thinking this way to make it like super sustainable in the long run. But yeah,
for sure. There's a lot of interesting things being done in mining. It's like, as Daniel introduced MinerSummit in yesterday morning, as long as Bitcoin is king, mining will be fundamental to the network, and it's really incentivizing people to source low cost energy, and not only that, it's incentivizing them to come up with innovative solutions. Things like the heaters we seen in some of the stands yesterday. Also, there are containers which make use of the gas which would have otherwise been leaked into the environment to be used as energy. So mining is incentivizing people source low cost energy, come up with innovative solutions. It's an extremely exciting area to keep on top of, and it's absolutely fundamental to Bitcoin.
Though the one thing that I'll add, Apolline, based on what you just said about like these like giving, like pouring heat back and kind of like finding a way to like reuse these resources, I feel like the people that, because this is such a nascent industry and like there are so many people in this space that like this is the background that they have, like post academia, or even like just like in the middle of school, or they have like some of the people who are doing like flaring at sites to as a way to power their operations. They come from a very different viewpoint. So I feel like the people who are finding ways to like reuse that energy are the people who have worked in power generation in the past more so, or like worked in renewables and are like on the clean energy clean energy train, right? And so trying to find ways to make Bitcoin even more efficient in that sense, which is very cool. Last question that I have. So thinking about Bitcoin mining in the future, you already know where this is going, right? So if Bitcoin reaches like 100K, Bitcoin reaches 1 million, if Bitcoin reaches 10 million, what does that mean? Like, what are the implications for its energy consumption and what that looks like globally?
So, I'm just going to base on the model we've developed. So what we saw is like when there is like spikes in the Bitcoin price, the profitability threshold increases, but actually it's very often corrected quite quickly, because it means that a lot of old equipment becomes profitable again, and so a lot of miners will plug their old equipment, but then the difficulty actually increases, network difficulty increases, and then the profitability threshold then stabilize again. So that's kind of the...
It's a never-ending cycle, right? Price rises, miner margins increase, more miners are incentivized to come in, hash rate increases, difficulty increases, miner margins are squeezed, they have to shut down, hash rate drops, difficulty drops, and so on and so on and so on. The difficulty adjustment is one of the smartest designed elements I've ever came across. It constantly adjusts to incentivize miners to participate or not to participate based on their individual factors of production. Yeah.
The amount of economic thought that had to go into developing the system that is today is just mind-blowing.
One interesting thing, though, with the system and how it's designed is, if we look decades into the future, will the incentives to miners be a problem because of dropping block subsidy? Because to compensate for dropping block subsidy, we either need an increase in price or we need an increase in fees, but neither of these are guaranteed. However, there is a lot of reason to believe that we will see either an increase in price or an increase in fees, And if a lot of stuff is built on top of the Bitcoin-based layer, then a lot of this will be coming into fees as well, because it needs to be settled on the base layer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a topic for another day, obviously, but another interesting conversation we could dive into.
Yeah. No, that's definitely interesting. Very long, a long debate that awaits that topic, though. Definitely.
Absolutely. And only time will tell, right?
Yeah. Well, Apolline and John, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so much fun. I really enjoyed talking to you both and getting to know more about your backgrounds. And I hope you guys had fun doing this podcast as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks,
all right.
Cassie.
Well, I think that we've got either another session to go to or dinner and an after party.
MinerSummit.
Yeah, let's go.
Pandas.
Pandas. So cute.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye. That does it for the second episode of the What's Halvening podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. See the links in the episode description to check out Apolline and John's work, or read more about one of the methodologies or studies discussed in today's episode. Happy early Thanksgiving to those of you in the States, and we'll see you again next week. The What's Halvening podcast is a BTC Media produced podcast on the Let's Talk Bitcoin network. It was produced and edited by Christian Corollas. Stay tuned for new episodes of What's Halvening by subscribing to this podcast or by following us on Twitter at What's Halvening. For more stories and coverage on mining and Bitcoin, head over to bitcoinmagazine.com or follow our Twitter account at Bitcoin Magazine to keep up with all the latest. You can find more engaging podcasts over at letstalkbitcoin.com, and you can follow them on Twitter at the LTB Network for all of the latest episodes. And lastly, I'd like to once again thank my guests, Apolline and John, for joining me today.